Hey guys, welcome into the recorded on Friday, airing on Friday, February 9th, February. A lot of people say that wrong. It's not February, it's February. February 9th, 2024, CBG Podcast. Hope everybody is having a great day. It is a Friday, so I don't know if you're having an adult beverage or two. I'm having a glass of Chianti here, so... Of course, I was just live actually for All in the Charts. For those of you who are into technical analysis, I was just updating everybody in terms of what I'm seeing in the charts because we had a lot of really good strength come into the markets today. Bitcoin was up as much as over 5%, getting closer and closer to that $48,000 range. Of course, on Sunday, more than likely, I'll be live streaming again for a weekly close. If you guys are into that, hopefully, if you're subscribed to this channel, key weekly close coming up on Sunday. So make sure to tune in for that, as well as my thoughts in terms of shorter term and longer term prices that I'm expecting here in the markets. But in terms of today, I'm really excited to talk to you about different thoughts that I have on what's going on in the economy, right? I think a lot of people either are confused by a lot of stuff going on within the economy and don't quite understand how a lot of the inner workings, how the engine runs, I guess you could say. And quite frankly, a lot of people just don't have the time to research this stuff. I always say, like, I'm a single guy in terms of not being married and having a family, right? So, you start getting into the the meaty part of life where you got a wife and you got a couple kids, and all of a sudden you're barely trying to fit in that 9 to 5, right? So a lot of people, it's not that they're not extremely educated and really intelligent. They just, quite frankly, they just don't have the time, right? So one of the things that I'm hoping to accomplish in this live stream and future live streams to come is we kind of dive into the economy, because this is not going to be the only podcast episode in which we do that. I'm really hoping to keep things in layman's terms, keep it stupid simple, just like I do with the charts. So I'll never profess to be an economist. I'm far from it. I'm a student of the game. I think all of this is a game. I'm a student of the game. I always will be. I still consider myself fairly early on in terms of the learning journey of how the economy works. But I do know enough on certain key points, and I am a fairly intelligent individual. So if I don't understand something or don't know something, if you have a question for me, because this is a live stream, I'll certainly be upfront with you. But the things I am speaking to, I'm well-versed enough that I feel confident I can explain it in a sensible manner. So that's really the end game. We don't have to know, to truly understand what's going on in the economy around us and how everything is interwoven and all the various domino effects. We don't need to know all the nitty-gritty. We don't, okay? But we need to have more than a surface-level understanding in terms of how things operate to most benefit from an investment strategy, right, perspective. So, Kyle, good to see you in here. Oof, let's fucking go. It's always good to see you in here, my friend. Guys, before we delve into the economy, figured I would start off with a little nutritional tidbit of information. Since, the last live stream we were talking about nutrition, and we were talking about how I work out and all those things. So I thought something I could do real quick before we get into some numbers and some economy stuff. I could at least share with you some factual information today regarding like calories and what that looks like for me and types of food that I eat. So right now, as you know, if you're not aware, when I came back to YouTube and I was out of commission for a while, it's because I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer and I had a complete thyroidectomy. And so, I'm a couple months out from surgery now, doing pretty well, and still trying to get my metabolism correct, trying to get on the right medication to balance what's known as your TSH levels. I'll get some blood work work next week to see how it's doing, but I can tell my metabolism still isn't where it needs to be. That's just my sense. But anyway, while I'm trying to get my metabolism correct, I've done something I've never done before, which is track my calories. So I'll actually tell you how many calories roughly I'm consuming a day, what the calorie breakdown is, and then I'll give you an example of the foods that I've eaten today. Because at least based on people I've interacted with, they're actually very interested in knowing this. So right now I'm 5'8". I'm approximately 173.5 pounds. You got differentials each day, each morning in body weight. But now I don't know my body fat percentage. I would guess my body fat percentage is extremely low. I would guess it's, and especially after this post-surgical complications I had and going on a zero-fat diet, I would guess my body fat is, anywhere between 5 to 6%. I think it's extremely low at this point. It's something probably worth measuring at some point. But right now I have a goal weight of 172. So really, ideally, the body weight I'd like to be at is 172. So 173, 172, I'm fine with that. So the way my FitnessPal, which is what I use, tracks my calories, it tells me how many calories I should eat based on that goal of getting down to 172. So my total caloric intake, of course, the one thing real quick before I read this off, it doesn't track my daily activity. So if I spend 3 hours at the gym doing weight training and cardio work, it doesn't adjust for that. So I will say that's one fault of this app, that I don't have anything linked in terms of activity level. But anyway, it has me at 2,260 calories per day, which is really not that much. Now, I tweaked the percentage breakdowns. You can come in here and custom edit your macros. So the way I have this is 230 grams of protein, 230 grams of carbs, and 51 grams of fat. Now, I will say you can't custom build these macros outside of 5% increments. So really what I'm aiming for are carbohydrates higher than 230, more like 240, 250. And I'm aiming for fat just under 51, more in the 40s. And my protein doesn't have to be 230. It could be at 220, 210. But that's just to give you a rough breakdown. Now, last thing I wanted to hit on real quick. Let's take a look at what food I have eaten today. So, let me see the easiest way to get this. I'll go to yesterday. The other thing to be mindful of is I am also doing a fast. So every day, what I've started to do, and this was actually before my surgery, I've decided to try intermittent fasting. So my goal is every day to fast between 15 to 16 hours. I've been very successful at that. Some days it's in the 15 range, some days it's 16, some days it's closer to 17, but right in that 15 to 16 range. And I have not chosen to do intermittent fasting for fat loss. I have chosen to do intermittent fasting because based on the education and research I've done, it has shown to increase energy levels, increase longevity in terms of just overall health, and it increases your body's ability to fight off diseases. So all these, and aging too, reduce the impacts of aging. So all these positive items that I was reading about associated with intermittent fasting, I was like, I want to give this a shot. So it's been working very well. So I don't eat before I work out. My energy levels have been pretty damn solid in the morning. All right, so here we go. Let me give you an idea of what I ate yesterday for the entire day. Pumpkin puree, raspberries, egg whites, unsweetened chocolate almond milk, vanilla fortitropin. I'm hoping to get a partnership with them. If you don't know what fortitropin is, yolk, look it up. It's a supplement I take for strength. Vanilla fortitropin. One Brazil nut. I take one Brazil. Fun fact, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be looking to take a Brazil nut every single day because it is a form of natural selenium, which is very good for someone who is hypothyroidic, which I will be for the rest of my life. So it has a high degree, has all the selenium you need in one day. I had a little bit of cereal. I had some Heritage Flakes, Coconut flour, blackberries, very good for someone who's hypothyroidic. Cranberries, again, good for someone who's hypothyroidic. These were the 50% less sugar dried variety pack from Ocean Spray. I got a high fiber tortilla wrap. Mixed nut butter with seeds from the Kirkland brand, very good. A half an apple. Julian Bakery, it's Pro Granola Chocolate Cluster. It's a very good granola that's low carb. Iso Pure Vanilla Protein Powder. It's like the cleanest protein powder you can eat. Iso Pure. Baby spinach. Asparagus. Romaine lettuce. Celery sticks. Tzatziki dip. Chicken. Definitely chicken. Been doing more of that lately than fish because I'm trying to watch my fat intake. Trader Joe flaxseed tortilla chips. Ultra filtered fat-free milk from Fairlife. Unsweetened vanilla almond milk. Strawberries, the frozen variety from Kirkland. Non-fat Greek yogurt. Different types of protein powder here. I got the vanilla milkshake from Premier Protein. That's really good. I use less of it because it's less clean, but it's very good tasting. Plain couscous. These are so damn good. If you guys haven't had this, you need to check this out. These are dried shiitake mushroom crisps from Costco. They are so good. Nutritional yeast, and then that's it. And so that comprised my calories. It looks like I came, let me see my caloric. I came in at 230 grams of protein, 250 carbs, 45 fat. Very low sugar, 76 grams. And I have no problems taking a number 2 every day. We got a lot of fiber in there. Okay, let's get into more of a. I love my mahi, by the way, Evan. Let's get into what's up, Ricky. Good to see you in here, man. Let's get into some talk about the economy here. So now, there's no way. I started jotting down a script for myself here on the side here. You can't see this, but I have some notes I wrote throughout the day here trying to formulate my thoughts. So just to give you a little bit of background on myself, because I think it's important before we start talking. I'm not going to do this every single podcast when we talk about the economy. So allow this to be sort of the blueprint in terms of laying the foundation for me being a credible source in terms of how I'm presenting the information. That's how I would put it as. First off, just a little bit of background about me personally and professionally. I graduated in 2004. I have a degree in actuarial science. I have a bachelor's of arts in a BA, and it's business administration degree, but it's actuarial science specifically, and a minor in mathematics. I'm a credentialed fellow of the Society of Actuaries. I'm a data analytics guy. I'm not an economist. But I am someone who, stereotypically as an actuary is very data-driven, very empirically based. I like to look at numbers and allow that to tell me the story. Kind of plays out as a chartist as well. And so, how did I get into this whole avenue of economics? Kind of started with Bitcoin. Bitcoin started to open up the door to me in terms of asking the question of what was wrong with our economy. In 2008 and 2009, during the financial crisis, I was fortunately very protected in my career. I was in something known as the student program. It was a program at a health insurance company I worked for at the time where they funded your exams, your actuarial exams. They gave you a little bit of study hours. And so during a really tough economic time, I had no idea what was going on. I was protected. I was like a boy in a bubble. Everybody in those programs, your job was protected. It was very rare to hear about an actuary getting laid off. When you work in the actuarial field, it's a very niche field. So you don't hear about a lot of actuaries getting laid off. Might happen during times of divestitures or business acquisitions, but that's different. I mean, just all things considered, when during tough economic times, it's very uncommon for actuaries to get laid off. Well, our company was laying off actuaries. Like, there were a lot of scary things going on. I didn't really know what was going on with the great financial crisis. I remember watching Bank of America's stock price going down to like $3. At that point, too, this goes to show, I'll just be very transparent. Sorry, I'm having a grocery delivery order. So I got to keep this phone out. I might have to check out for a few seconds here. But I remember when everything was going on in the stock market, and this is me really being transparent with you guys. And look, we've all been there. So I was listening to people at that point and following people from an educational resource standpoint that I now laugh at. I used to be a Mad Money guy. I used to listen to CNBC all the time in the mornings. And so I saw all these crazy things going on in the stock market, and I didn't know how to make sense of it. And then I stumbled upon Bitcoin. And so ever since then, I've been on this journey to better understand not only cryptocurrencies. I don't know if it kind of bleeds through and all on the charts. I mean, we do cover traditional markets because everything ties in together. But I've sort of found this new passion in life, not only within crypto and not only with Bitcoin and that industry as well, but I've really enjoyed spending my free time learning about how the economy works. And so how I best do that for myself, I listen to a lot of YouTube videos. And a lot of, I can dedicate another podcast to talking about different sources that I go to. But the only thing I go to legacy media for or traditional news outlets for, sometimes I will listen to it, very rarely, but sometimes I will, just to get a pulse on what the herd mentality is. And if you don't have an understanding for what the herd mentality is, it's essentially what the majority of people think or believe about something going on. And obviously most people, this isn't a knock against most people, but most people are average or mediocre in terms of how their finances are structured because they have a herd mentality, because they listen to traditional news outlets, because that's all they know. So what I've learned in life is that, and it's much like this with anything in life, in my opinion, is quite often times, not all the time, but quite often when everybody is going left, it pays off to go right. There's a fork on the road, and instead of going left, you go right. Everybody else is going left, but you're like, I don't think that really makes sense. I'm kind of questioning why everyone is going left. So, yeah, my gut is telling me and my intellect is telling me to go right. So I, the news outlets that I pay attention to and I listen to, the YouTube channels, they are non-traditional news outlets. And I think increasingly over time, what you'll find, and this is the advent of social media, is these news outlets will predominantly become the news outlets that we go to. They will be. Legacy news outlets are a thing of the past. Anyone paying attention to them, I think you're really, really making a grave mistake. And so the educational content that I have for you today, the thoughts that I share with you in this podcast, as well as successive podcasts in the future surrounding the economy, it's really based on the wealth of knowledge that I have come to learn from others whom I respect in this space. There's different YouTube channels that I listen to and watch, and again, I can think of dedicating a podcast to put some of those things together. But that's kind of the foundation for all of the commentary that I have for you today, and the commentary that I will have for you in the many months to come. And so with that being said, there's kind of a few few different avenues we can go here, but I wanted to level set the conversation and kind of talk about a few different themes that will resonate in today's podcast as well as successive podcasts as well. The first theme that I wanted to talk about are deceiving statistics and numerical measurements of economical health of the economy. So statistics that are deceiving in nature, or numerical values that are deceiving in nature, representing measurements of how healthy our economy is. Specifically, what I'm speaking to here, things we'll talk about, which inflation numbers the Federal Reserve focuses on and how they're being measured. I've spoken in the past how the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI, is a bullshit measurement. It's a very subjective measurement that doesn't take into account a lot of things that you and I feel in terms of true inflation. Just think about it this way. If I said to you that the Federal Reserve has been commenting on how inflation is down to 3%, or 2.5%, or 3.25%, if you really think about that for a second, does inflation feel, everything around you feel like it's getting expensive by 3%? No, it feels like it's getting more expensive by 5, 10, or 15%, right? Most of what we spend money on is food and energy, and those things are not increasing at 3%, okay? If I, as an actuary, and I do quite well for myself, if I am feeling the pinch of inflation when I go to the grocery store, inflation is much higher than 3%, okay? Inflation is much, much higher than 3%. Give me 1 second. Thank you. Okay, so moving on here. Which inflation number the Fed focuses on? How about job numbers? You know, the Federal Reserve comes out here, and a lot of the decisions they're making on interest rates have to do with job numbers. Okay, a lot of deceiving measurements being given here. You know, when you're looking at job numbers, things will kind of talk about part-time versus full-time work, job numbers being restated down, people dropping out of the job market looking for jobs and whether that's being counted, the birth-death model, like what the hell is the birth-death model and how is that being used? One of the things that, and it's the reason I can appreciate this as an actuary, when a number is being reported to you. So if the Federal Reserve comes out and says unemployment rates are 3%, the question I would have, again, just being a data guy, if you're not a data guy, I understand if this doesn't readily become apparent to you when a number is being read to you. A number is only as good as the underlying assumptions feeding that number. Does that make sense? So if you're telling me the unemployment rate is 3%, I'm not going to say, oh, cool. That means that, only 3% of people aren't working. All right. I'm wiping my hands. I'm done with that. I'm good to go. No. As a data person, I say, okay, 3%, but what is your assumption to build that 3%? Are you counting every single demographic that exists? Are you counting everybody that could potentially be looking for a job? I was just asked today, I finished up an analysis today and wrote up a memo to send to senior management. And in that memo was a mortality cost estimate. And that mortality cost estimate had a whole bunch of assumptions with it. And without those assumptions, the mortality cost estimate is meaningless. It's completely meaningless. I came up with a mortality cost estimate on something, and I had to explain what assumptions were used to account for adverse mortality within that population cohort. Okay? Without that underlying assumption and how I derived it, the actual value for whatever the mortality cost estimate was meaningless. Well, it's meaningless for Jerome Powell to come out and tell me what a 3% unemployment rate means without the underlying assumption. So that's something we'll talk about. Another common theme that a few themes that are going to be very readily apparent in our conversations are consumer sentiment and consumer conditioning. So we'll spend some time kind of understanding where consumer sentiment is, but what also is the consumer conditioning, specifically around buy now, pay later, consumer sentiment surrounding a government social safety net and what that means. We'll draw on some direct parallels between credit card debt and government debt. Another theme that we're going to hit on is officials saying one thing and doing another. And we'll spend some time talking about the Silicon Valley collapse back in March of 2023. How that was just the beginning of bank failures. There's going to be a lot more bank failures that play out this year. But, officials saying one thing and doing another. How Silicon Valley's bank failure played into what Jerome Powell said. And how his words were not followed up by the actions he spoke to. Bear Stearns, Lehman, different companies coming on CNBC and saying they were going to be okay. They were not. They all failed back in 2008 and 9. So just, a common theme is you have to dig deeper than the surface level information that's being spoon-fed to you. Let me level set this by asking you a question. Do you believe what politicians tell you? I mean, seriously, do you really believe what politicians tell you? If there's anything that I'm cynical in life about, it's politics. I routinely say this. I'm not cynical about marriage. I'm not cynical about my job or career. I'm not cynical about religion or faith. I'm not cynical about anything in life. The only thing I'm cynical about in life is politics. It's a fucking clown show. It's a shit show, okay? And you have to be very careful about what you believe and what you don't believe. But, I'll just let that one stand. Another common theme that's going to resonate, hopefully, within the material that I present is how much within the economy represents a set of dominoes. And one and the sensitivity of that and how there's a domino effect within the economy. So if you interact with one domino and it falls, it can have serious repercussions on the entire economy. Job numbers being restated down and what that means for production estimates, and then what that means for your view on inflation, a recession, consumers defaulting on debt and what that could mean. We'll get more into that. And then also the last theme that's going to kind of resonate, looks like my mouse died. Another common theme that's going to resonate within a lot of the material that we're going to touch on here are the clear divergences that are present between the stock market performance and the economy performance. I very routinely hit on this. The stock market and crypto markets are in a melt-up phase, in my opinion. In my educated view, based on the technicals, we are in a melt-up phase. The stock market is nowhere near to topping. Crypto is nowhere near topping. I believe everything's going to top this year. I think at latest, we're going to see a top in early 2025. But I think more than likely, everything is going to top this year. Okay? That doesn't mean the economy is doing well. And we'll explain why. But one of the things that I certainly at some point want to spend a lot of time talking about, and we're not going to get to it in this podcast, I've done a lot of, and it's still, everything is not clicking 100%. I've listened and re-listened, and I still need to digest. I've spent a lot of time listening to Raoul Pal. I'm not sure if you know who he is, and what the everything code is, and how we're essentially on an interest rate cycle. But one of the things he hits on is how technology stocks, AI stocks, and crypto have completely outperformed every other asset class since M2 money has increased in supply. And if you don't know what M2 money is, we'll get into that as well. So something else to keep in mind. All right, so where to start? Well, first I want to see who is in the comments here. Evan is blowing up the comments. Dear God. What is up, Evan? Sorry, I haven't been reading comments the whole time, man. The real SR. What's up, CBG? What's up, my brother? What's up, my fellow crypto brother? Yeah, Evan, it's just when you blow up the tweets, when you blow up the comments with 5,000 comments, it's hard for me to really follow the ones I should pay attention to. So, on the one hand, I appreciate the engagement. I really do. And I love that you're here every single day. On the other hand, try to limit the comments, because think about it on my end. I'm trying to look for the comments I should be commenting on. And when I see 35 lines of your comments, I can't follow, all right? But I do appreciate the engagement. All right, let's get back to kind of where I wanted to get into in the podcast here. So where to start, right? The question I think we have to ask ourselves is, why are we, if we just want to sort of take a step back, okay, 5,000-foot view, why are we in the quote-unquote perceived problem that we are in at today? Why are we in a problematic economic scenario? Because I do believe, I'm sitting down right now. I need to stand up. I'm not outside. I'm inside, and I need to stand up. I can't do this sitting down. Okay. Jesus Christ, this thing is not. Okay. I have a sitting, standing automated desk from Uplift Desk. If you would like to sponsor me, let me know. It's a great desk. I've had this thing since 2016 when I began trading. I think where we really need to start is where the problem began to sort of derail our economy. And where that starts, it has everything to do with the dollar. So it really amazes me. It's probably something that I'll catch myself from time to time commenting on. But I remember when I was at work, I'm still working, unfortunately. When I was at work at my former job, I had the freedom, which I don't have in my existing job, and I kind of miss. Don't kind of miss, I really miss. I had the freedom to give a presentation at work on anything I wanted to give a presentation on. And so I gave a presentation on inflation. And in that presentation, I spoke to a lot of things. But what came out of that dialogue was I actually had a conversation with my manager. Very smart woman, a very kind, gentle, a sweet soul, very nice woman, one of the nicest people I've ever met in the actuarial community, and actually miss working with her and reporting to her. But what she did was she reached out to me after the presentation and expressed her appreciation for the information. And she didn't realize when I had commented on savers or losers. And I backed that up and explained what I meant. You're not an actual loser, but she didn't understand how her purchasing power could erode by taking her capital, her money, and sticking it in a savings account. Here you have an extremely brilliant business professional who did not understand what I would consider to be the basic concept that her purchasing power was eroding by sticking it in a savings account. And it's a clear example that even someone who is financially well off, someone who is extremely brilliant and intelligent, did not understand the core concept of inflation and what a fiat dollar was. And so, yes, I helped to explain to her those concepts, and it also motivated her. I should actually follow up with her. It helped to motivate her to look into investing more of her capital outside of a savings account. Savers are losers. If you're taking your money and parking it, a lot of it, in a savings account, that is a poor man's mentality. And I don't mean to offend anyone, but if a lot of your capital is sitting in a checking or savings account earning, you want to quote me 0.1% or 0.25% at most if you're lucky, that's essentially zero. You are losing wealth by doing that. It is the dumbest thing you could do with your money. The dumbest thing. Oh, but it's safe. Oh, no, you're only FDIC insured up to a certain amount. And yes, if you have $30 or $40 or $50,000 in there and you think that you're being safe by doing it, you're still losing purchasing power. It's the dumbest. It's the most. It just blows my mind that people think that is the smartest thing they can do with their wealth. Let me explain why. Okay. We need to go back, again, where the problem started. And where the problem started was when we took the United States dollar, and when it once had a fixed supply, we took it away from that. So the United States dollar many, many years ago, and I don't know the right year, but the United States dollar used to be completely fixed in supply. And the reason it was fixed in supply was because the United States dollar was essentially a promissory note for gold. The value of a dollar was tied to gold. Now, what this did was it fixed the supply such that it wouldn't allow overspending. It was a way to, think of it this way. It enacted discipline within the economy because it necessitated how much you could or couldn't spend. It limited the government. It limited how much they could spend on things and curbed any inflation in the market. Well, we got away from that. Okay, and if you actually study the history of money, what you will find, and this is an important point to note as we get towards the pandemic, what you will find is that what's known as a fiat dollar is a dollar that is backed by nothing to fix the supply. The only thing it's backed by is a government promise. And essentially what the government can do is they can print as many of those fiat dollars as they want for purposes of their spending. And what you'll find is there were many, many countries in the past, thousands of years, that were world-dominating entities that had fiat dollars, and all of them self-destructed. And the reason they self-destructed was because it always was initiated by war. At times of war, the spending just got out of control. They debased the monetary value of their currency, and inflation ran rampant. Okay, so in the United States, and I think all of us are kind of, in many ways, I think a lot of us here in the United States are very naive to think that something similar couldn't happen, that the dollar completely gets debased. But let's not get too sidetracked here. So the dollar used to be 100% backed by gold. Then we went to something called the Bretton Woods system, which was a partial backing by gold. So the government essentially needed to spend more than it had and that it should have. So they partially backed it by gold so they could justify spending money on things like war, because we love to be engaged in wars. So we partially backed it by gold. Then in 1971 or 1972, President Nixon came out and said he was temporarily, of course this became a permanent enactment, they were temporarily suspending the backing of the dollar by gold. And so what this did is, and you'll find this common theme, I should have put this in a common theme, government officials will essentially lie to you by coming out to you and telling you, they'll give you great verbiage. In this case, to mask what it is they're doing. So in this case, they were temporarily suspending the value of the dollar being backed by gold. Essentially what he was saying is, yeah, the dollar is no longer backed by gold, and we can essentially create as much of that dollar as we want to. We can print as much of it as we want to, okay? It can be a digital representation. They're not actually going to a money printer and printing it, but a digital representation of it. But we can create as much U.S. dollars as we want to. This is what's known as a fiat dollar. So we went from a dollar backed by gold to a partial backing by gold, known as the Bretton Woods system, to a complete non-backing of the dollar to any fixed backing, and we went to something called a fiat dollar system. A fiat dollar system, all that means, again, the U.S. dollar is a fiat dollar. Every single currency is fiat. The government can come out and they can inject as much fiat dollars into the system to let me think about how I want to say this. They can create as much monetary wealth in the system as they need to spend money where they need to spend money. That's essentially what it comes down to. Okay? This is really where things began to be led astray. Because quickly what we found out was, as soon as we went to this monetary standard where we could just print dollar bills, okay, we could create money, essentially, or create currency, technically. Money and currency are two different things. Topic for another day. But we could create as much currency as we wanted, and we could run up debt levels to astronomical levels, and there seemingly were no repercussions for this. This is really where all the problems began, because now you have people in charge. They have political interests. Okay, they have political interests. People are people. We're all faulty. You know, everybody is imperfect. People in political power, if they're not tainted before they come into a position of power, they are eventually. And what they're looking to do is to retain their position of power, right? And so what this enabled them to do, since there's literally no fixed supply on the dollar, they can print it at will. They can print it to fund wars. They can print it to fund social programs. They can print it to fund stimulus checks. They can do whatever the hell they want to do. This is really where the problem began. Now, where this really first became evident was in 2008 and 2009. There was a financial crisis, okay? Without going into the details of that. And what the Federal Reserve stepped in and did, well, first off, they dropped interest rates, which we're going to get back to. But they dropped interest rates to a astronomically low level? 0. They dropped it from, they dropped interest rates, which were roughly around current levels, and they sharply dropped it from, 5.25 to 0. Okay, that's the first thing they did. Then they essentially printed a whole bunch of money. That's the way you can most easily think of it. They printed a whole bunch of money, and they bailed out the big banks. The big banks. Okay, the small banks, they got absorbed by the larger banks. Okay, the larger banks gobbled them up, and the larger banks got bailed out by the government. And the way they did this is they injected M2 money supply. Remember that term, M2 money supply? So here is the easiest way I think you can think of what M2 money supply is, and the way that helps me to just think about it really high level. M2 money supply is the increase of the dollar. Okay, how many dollars? What's the supply? What does the supply of the US dollars look like? Well, again, it's a fiat system. So the supply is not fixed. The supply is based on whatever the government wants it to look like. There could be 1 fiat dollar. There could be 100 fiat dollars. Now, it's important to recognize as you increase that M2 money supply, okay, as you increase the supply of something, this is the basic law of economics, okay, demand and supply. If there's more of something, it becomes less valuable, right? If there was, I'm going to bring this back to crypto. If there was only 1 Bitcoin that ever existed, wouldn't it be worth a lot? But if there were like 1 million Bitcoin, wouldn't it be worth less? If there was 1 ocean that you could see, if there was only 1 ocean you could go to on the entire planet, wouldn't it cost a lot of money to vacation at that 1 ocean and spend time at the beach? Versus if you had a choice of like 30 oceans on the coastline, chances are you could negotiate rates and find a lot cheaper of a price depending what beach you want to, right? There's an increased supply, right? So the whole point of giving you these examples is to illustrate that if you increase the supply dramatically, especially it devalues something. M2 money supply, think of it as how much fiat dollars exist in the system. If we drastically increase the supply, it decreases the value of the US dollar. It's called debasement. Okay? So in 2008 and 2009, we debased the value of the dollar by saving the banks. The other thing that's very interesting to keep note of is we essentially made it a lot easier to lend money, borrow money. Interest rates were at 0. We needed to free up the capital systems. It's like think of it like a bike, the chains on a bike. We needed to lubricate the gears on that bike to get the money system flowing within the economy. Okay? Now, slowly from 2006, this is an important note here. Slowly, very slowly, from 2016 to 2019, we saw very, very, very small interest rate increases. Very, very small interest rate increases. In fact, I want to go to the federal funds rate to best illustrate this. So if you're up until this point, if you've been listening to the podcast, it's been fine. But this is the point where you actually want to visually look here if you can. At this point in time, let me see if I can. Yep, here we go. This here is the great financial crisis, right in this time in here, okay? And you can see there was a dramatic decrease in rates. And look at how low rates were. And then we started to just look at how small these interest rates are. Look at the dates. October 2015, 0.12. This is the federal funds rate. In January of 17, we're only up to just over 0.5%. Like very small increases. You can see here, federal funds rate right now, we're at 5 1/3, right? Same level we were at before the financial crisis, 5 basically 1/4, 5 1/3, okay? So the point is they started to just barely increase interest rates. Okay? And wanted to talk about interest rates here for just a moment. Okay? Let me pause and actually see if there's questions, if anybody has any questions for me. Good. Evan's just blowing up the comments feed. That's always good to see, Evan. It's always good to see. Let's actually get into the beer virus real quick. You know, one of the things I spoke to on here, and it relates to what we just talked about, the 08 and 09 financial crisis, as well as how a fiat currency becomes debased. Something I paid particular attention to, and it's interesting the way life works, but I was learning about the history of money. I was really into Mike Malone's history of money. And one of the things he commented on in the history of money was how the debasement, remember that's the increase in supply of M2 on a fiat currency, how the debasement of a currency typically gets exacerbated and just continues endlessly is through times of war. That's really because the government comes in and they just need all this spending for military and all this stuff. I mean, you see, it's ridiculous, guys. I mean, come on. I don't want to get into politics here, but did you see the latest bill passed? We're sending $60 billion to Ukraine. We have a very serious illegal immigration crisis in the United States. And unfortunately, you know, I hate to sound negative. I think I'm being a realist. Unfortunately, I think it's opened up the floodgates for future terrorist actions in the United States because we've allowed all these fucking illegal people, we don't even know who the fuck they are, coming into the United States. I mean, a country without borders is not a country, right? You do need a process in place for legal immigration. These radical left people who claim that people who want legal immigration in place are racist, or it's not about being, no, that's not what it's about. It's about having sensible, logical regulation in place to have legal immigration. This country was founded on immigration. I'm all for immigration, legal immigration. Okay? Now we've opened up the door to God knows who coming in, and you think there isn't going to be a terrorist event in the United States? Again, it's the left pandering to people who have no idea what the fuck is going on, and they're naive to things. No idea. But anyway, we send $60 billion to Ukraine. We're constantly sticking our nose in other people's business. We're entering wars. We're creating wars. I was very ears open when former President Trump said during the pandemic, he compared the beer virus to a war. As soon as he said that, I said, okay, he's setting the stage here. He's setting the stage for a massive monetary debasement of our currency. And that's exactly what happened. In 2020, we saw the largest injection of M2 money supply that ever has happened. It completely debased our currency. Now, that debasement of currency, what does that mean if you've been following what I've been saying? The debasement of our currency, the US dollar, what that implies in layman's terms is a drastic increase of the M2 money supply. What does that mean in layman's terms? It means a drastic increase in supply of United States dollars. And if there's a much bigger base, a bigger supply of US dollars, there's more US dollars, well then it becomes less valuable. There's a lot more dollars. It takes a lot more, now in the future, it takes a lot more US dollars to purchase the same thing. That was the largest driver of inflation, guys. You can listen to the Federal Reserve if you want and believe everything that you're hearing and not do any education. But the biggest reason that you saw inflation occur the way it did, all the food prices going up, all these things occurring, it was because of the debasement of our currency. It just simply took more US dollar bills to purchase the same thing. It wasn't that all of a sudden something became more expensive overnight. No, I mean, there's production costs. There's all these costs, energy costs that go into things. And it just took more US dollars to purchase those same things. Now, I understand there were supply constraints during the beer virus because of the lockdowns, yes. But the biggest reason is because all of a sudden we doubled our monetary supply overnight. I mean, that's why. And it took time. It's another concept we can get into later. There's something called the velocity of money. It takes time until that money actually enters the economy and it's realized and you actually see inflation. It's not instantaneous. But the whole point of where I was going here is the beer virus resulted in a huge debasement of our currency. The other thing that took place during the beer virus was, the Federal Reserve tried to start to increase interest rates, as I was indicating before, 16 going into 19. But it was partly based on the beer virus, and it was partly based on markets pooping their pants at the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates, that they backed off, and we dropped interest rates again to an artificially low 0% interest rate. You can see it right here. Look again, right here, we're at this artificially low interest rate of 0%. Now you will see from 2009 to 2022, this is a really key point, for 13 years, except for this little rise up to 2%, we've known nothing but easy money, 0% interest rates. This is what, and you have to think, there was an entire generation born during this period. I don't know if it's Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. I forget all the generations, what year. But kids just coming out of college, entering the workforce, understanding what lending standards were and how purchasing a home, all that stuff looked like. They were so used to all these 0% interest rates, low interest rates. Now that we're up to 5 1/3, they think these are high interest rates. This 5 1/3 interest rate is only high relative to recent times. Okay? You can see it was 5 1/4 here. If you go back prior to 2001, look at how high interest rates were up here. 8, 9, 6, 5, 4, 8, 9.5. 11. God, they were really high back here in the 70s and 80s. So these interest rates are not high from a historical perspective, but in recent times, they are very high. And these zero interest rates have really conditioned people, which is something we're going to get into. But what ended up happening after the beer virus, after we injected all of this liquidity into the market and dropped interest rates to zero, the Federal Reserve started to realize, oh, wait, we're starting to see a lot of inflation. We better increase interest rates. So they took this knee-jerk reaction and they started massively increasing interest rates. Look at the curve on this thing. They increased interest rates at a rate that is the highest that has been seen in the modern era. Look at how high these interest rates are, okay? Now, inflation had already started to take hold, okay? One of the things that's important to understand is as these actions are being taken place, there's always a lag effect that occurs. If you're increasing interest rates, think about this, just intuitively. If you're either debasing your currency and injecting a lot of dollar bills into the system, there's a lag effect. It takes a while for those dollar bills to actually materialize, meaning it takes a while for people to take those dollar bills and actually start spending them. It's not until they start spending the dollars until it starts showing up within the economy, and then the economy starts to sort of readjust its picture of how expensive things are, how much they cost. It's not until those dollar bills are spent. It's the same thing with interest rates. As soon as the Fed starts increasing interest rates, it's not realized right away. The economy has to absorb that and realize that. It takes a little bit for these higher interest rates to actually get realized within the market, okay? But one of the things I'm hoping you're seeing from this chart is very knee-jerk reactions here. We went from 5.25 down to 0 in no time. Then we started to gradually increase. Then we dumped back down to 0. Now we're going right back up to 5.75. Like, there have to be serious repercussions to taking these knee-jerk reactions, right? Wouldn't that intuitively make sense that jerking around on interest rates like this would have serious negative consequences within the economy? That is definitely something we're going to hit on. Kind of looking over some notes I have here on key things to hit on. How long are we into this podcast? Dear God, we're an hour in. You know what I think I'm going to do? We're an hour in here. I think what I'm going to do is, just so this podcast doesn't get super long, and I already see it's 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. We've been on for an hour. I think what I'm going to do is, I still have a ton of notes here, things I want to specifically talk about on interest rates, things I want to talk about within the jobs reports, and I want to tie everything together. So I think at least this was a good introduction. We talked about, and maybe I can think about picking this up actually tomorrow. I am going to be out and about during the day, but maybe in the evening I can pick this up tomorrow. But real quick, just to recap, we talked about common themes we're going to hit on. We talked about where the problem started. You know, the dollar being backed by gold, partial backing, a complete fiat dollar. We talked about the financial crisis. We talked about the beer virus. And so I really want to start getting into a conversation about interest rates, how the consumer has been tempered and conditioned. The effects that interest rates have on everything and the domino effect there, as well as jobs reports and how that also ties into everything and how those statistics and numerical values are quite deceiving. So I think we're gonna cut it off there. Perhaps I will live stream tomorrow, but part 2 of this is going to start going into interest rates, jobs reports, and kind of tying everything together. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the CBG Podcast. We will keep things going. We're also going to, on the next episode, we're going to get into this. I didn't even get into this outstanding credit card balance item that I wanted to get into. Man, there's a lot of stuff I still wanted to get into. I could be up here talking for 5 hours. So, all right, everybody, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next CBG Podcast. Take care, everybody.